Richard, and across from me over there is the Doctor himself.
Hello.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Woo! It's too early.
Yeah, it's very early.
It is
pretty early. It's never too early for comics, though, right?
That's true.
I mean, if any of this venue specifically, we should be able to do comics at all times of the day. So let's start that conversation. Each week we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners like yourselves. And today we have a very special guest. We're joined by host of the podcast, Fuck Buddies, and No Quest for the Wicked. We got Niall Spain here.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here, even though it's early.
It's very funny because leading into this, we asked Niall if he wanted to be on the podcast, and he was like, I know some about comics, and I was like, that's basically what this podcast is about, which is you can come in with a ton of knowledge, or you can come in with very, very little, and we'll meet you in the middle somewhere. Yeah, unlike the rest of the industry, we're opening our doors to anybody, no matter what they know.
Comics are fun. I just want people to like comics.
Hell yeah.
So that's why I came here, to convert the people that need that message.
But in case you're on the fence.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys
It's a great thing for me to say at Comic-Con.
Yeah,
People should
it'd be a
love
bold
comics.
move to come to Comicon and be like, maybe.
Yeah.
Hashtag brave.
Yeah.
But now, I know you have had some comic experience. You have read and watched some of that stuff. So where are you at with it? Like, I know you obviously, you have a D&D podcast, so you're clearly a dork.
Yeah.
But, like, is that where your dorkiness started? Was it with, like, comic TV shows and stuff like that? Like, tell me a bit about that journey.
For me, it was always like fantasy novels was my intro. Like, I read Lord of the Rings when I was like 8.
Hell yeah.
And that was kind of it for me. And then I started writing a lot of like fantasy stuff, and that was kind of like my whole thing. When I was a kid, I did read a bunch of comics, though. I read a bunch of like Spider-Man, Batman, and Sonic comics.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the Sonic comics were great, honestly.
Oh yeah, they were fucking amazing. One of my like best achievements to date was I sent a drawing of Sonic as a fish into Sonic the Comic and got it posted and won a watch from it.
Whoa, that's dope.
I don't think you're allowed to see the comics of Sonic that I've drawn, but
Yeah. No, that's
Oh, okay.
let's just see he's expecting.
Yeah.
But were you part, I mean, you were around the same generation, but you grew up in the UK, right?
Well, in Ireland.
So,
Not part of the
Oh.
UK.
Yeah,
St. Patrick's Day, they're gonna fucking hit us with that.
God.
Oh no. But did you get to watch any of the Batman animated series, that kind of thing? When you
I actually never saw the Batman animated series.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
There's a podcast that I wanted you to have this.
Okay, so I'm slightly curious about this because if you're growing up in Ireland and you're getting comics and that, were you just getting them kind of casually, or was it like, no, I like Spider-Man, I like Batman, I'm going to get them?
No, it was like hardcover copies, not even from like a comic shop.
Right.
Yeah, it was just like what they had in fucking Easton.
Yeah. Is there a superhero other than those two that you were like, you gravitated towards, or that you were aware of, or that you liked, like from movie like Superman or anything like that, or the X-Men or anything like that?
I was never really a Superman guy.
Wow.
Which is funny because one of my best friends actually has a podcast all about Superman and is obsessed, and his lifelong goal is to convert me. Always liked Wolverine. Wolverine was cool.
Sure, yeah. What is it about Superman that you were kind of...
This is an ongoing conversation with us, I think, because I find that whether you like Superman or not often will influence the rest of the types of the characters that you like. And so for me, like coming in, and I think I found, especially DC comics, I came through Superman more than I think a lot of the other characters. And I don't even know if it's as parallel as Batman versus Superman or anything like that. But for me, it was definitely the general melancholy of some of the Superman stuff that is what I really love.
Well, you like a very specific kind of Superman. You like like a
introverted,
like Superman for All Seasons, like a sad
yeah.
boy kind of Superman, which I agree. I also like.
Electric Superman.
Yeah, there's very different sort of versions of that, but I do find that like your interpretation of Superman typically will sort of reflect on the rest of your liking of comic book characters and stuff like that. So I'd be curious to know, what is your sort of thought on Superman and what like makes you like or dislike him?
I feel like it's a very boring take, and I feel like it's the most probably common take. It's just like he has every power. He's just too powerful. You know, like I tend to like very like flawed or like more, like Daredevil.
Right.
Not that he's not super, but like he's down in the trenches.
I mean, we've had this conversation before, and for anyone here who maybe isn't a DC fan, the difference between DC and Marvel seems to have been that like DC characters are a bit more like myths, right?
Yeah.
And Marvel's whole thing was like, but what if real people got those powers?
Yeah.
How would it like mess up their lives if like Daredevil or Spider-Man or something like that? And so I do think, like, I don't know that it necessarily holds true anymore, but I do think there was like a kind of era for that a little bit, and so I think it ends up being you sort of slot into, do you like that kind of grounded thing of like, what would I do if I had those powers?
Yeah.
And that's maybe a slightly more Marvel-y thing versus,
How cool is it to like revel in these characters?
I'm a big like Greek myth nerd,
Yeah,
and I like my Lord of the Rings. I like my big fantasy stuff. So like I go all in on like a kind of god character that's got crazy powers and just does good for no reason. You know what I mean? Like,
And I think that is the selling point of Superman that I came to later. It's like he has the ability to be the worst person ever, and doesn't. And that's, I think, the draw, and I actually really enjoy that about him. So
yeah, totally.
I think that is often what will pull me in with a character like that, which is when you're given everything, how do you accomplish things in spite of having everything available to you? And I think that those are always the best stories when it's like when you're forced to not be able to use everything at your disposal. It's kind of like being like a white guy in like a normal society now. It's like you have everything available to you.
Wow, tough take.
But I think that that is, this podcast specifically has been a journey over the last 7 years of, I think, rediscovering what I think he loves about comics and getting to really lift up all the rocks and talk about those things. And then for me, it's about the misinterpretation, I think, of comic books and then sort of understanding what they actually are. And I think over the last few years, it's been really, really fun to figure out, it's like, what are the actual, the valuable stories that are coming out through these things, and what are they actually saying, and then what are like the benefits of these characters beyond sort of punching and kicking, which we all love.
That's fucking right.
But I think that when you, it's like that's the layer that pulls you in, and then after that, where do you go from there, right? And how do you use those characters to tell meaningful stories?
I have a really good example of this that I want to throw out there.
Please.
My favorite character is Aquaman. He's been my favorite character for like my whole life.
Yeah, he's also a big fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs, so you can kind of see.
Not here, man.
Okay. See how this is going to be? Yeah, no, I love Aquaman, but Aquaman gets so much flack. People, maybe a little bit less now because Jason Momoa is really cool, but like I do think Aquaman was sort of like a joke character, and I always felt like I was like screaming at the wall, like Aquaman, he's a king, it's cool. People
cut off his hand and made it into water.
There's all these kind of like cool things. Yeah.
Was it always Aquaman for you, or did you come to it later, or was it just at first sight?
Aquaman and the Flash
are
like my two big favorites. Is anybody out here like a big Aquaman fan?
Friggin' A.
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
You're not just saying that to make me feel better because of the thing he said?
I read like every Aquaman from like 68 to 2012 or something.
Amazing. I love that. Yes. Yes?
He could send Jaws at someone if he wanted to.
That's right. You could send a Jaws at someone. That's right.
Release the Kraken.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Jason Momoa was good.
Yeah.
Jason Momoa is great.
we've been having a long conversation about, I think, Jason Momoa since he got in, and I think like strategically it made a lot of sense to have him sort of reestablish what that character is. I think and reset it for the like general populace. I think that it's maybe was not the best choice for Aquaman, but I think from like a strategic standpoint to get him into the zeitgeist and have people change their perspectives, I think there's a lot of value in that. But I mean, obviously, what we all want him is to be Lobo.
Yeah,
Like,
I think he'd be great as Lobo. He'd be really cool.
That's what I want.
So Lobo, have you ever seen this character now?
No.
So
You
Lobo,
bastard.
I feel so ashamed.
Lobo is this like giant hulking like space biker bounty hunter.
Oh yeah.
It's the best thing that came out of 90s DC.
Yeah, that's the guy there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. No, I've seen him. Very biker mice from Mars.
Oh, Biker Heights from Mars.
Which also I was obsessed with.
Oh yeah, those Vin Diesel commercials, or was that that was Street Sharks?
Also obsessed with that. Yeah.
But I think that Lobo is a great character because I think that they've realized the hilarity of that character and sort of been able to utilize that. I think to make some really fun books. But all the '90s things are not necessarily kept in that same sort of thing. But
So you grew up reading some comics.
Yeah.
Not crazy into them. Do you read any comics now?
I read like graphic novels.
Yeah.
That are like sometimes like I've read a bunch of.
it's a safe space. You can just say comics now.
I don't know why I did that. That was weird.
Honestly,
novels,
here's a real thing though. Like every time that we talk about our podcast, and Reed makes fun of me for it all the time. We'll talk to somebody and they're like, "Oh, you're in a podcast. What is it about?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's about comic books." And, and we did that the first time we came to this fan expo, and we were getting our passes, and they're like, "What's your podcast?" And I was like, "Dude, I just talk to these."
Yeah. Diminishing. Yeah.
So like Saga and
Saga,
like
great.
Monstrous and stuff. I actually wrote a comic last year that me and my partner made that got
Whoa.
shortlisted and then not published, but you know. And I read a bunch of the Batman stuff, so like Year One, and like they were amazing. Yeah. But like I want to be more into it, but I feel like it is pretty daunting.
Is it because like you're like, I haven't read 80 years of
it's just like
Batman,
where to start.
Is there anybody here who's like a newer comic book fan? That's like in the last few years you started getting into comic books. Anybody like that here?
Oh,
Cool. It's a conversation that we get asked a lot, and I think that's part of the problem, which is like, how do you get into it? And it explains why like New 52 happens, but
Listen,
you're an apologist, I know. Yeah.
I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah, I know. But I think for me, that's always the hard thing about it. That's why I love those Year One books and or the Earth One books especially too. I think like those books are such a great way to allow you to start getting into those universes and understanding them, even if it's not like one for one perfect with what the actual like lore is. I do like that there's still ways to get in without having to like go back and fight through the like silver golden age. Yeah.
I'll say this to totally, like, I'll tell on myself here. When I was getting back into comics, because I was into them when I was a kid, and then I went off and did other things, and then as an adult I was like, oh, I can just buy whatever I want with my money. I don't have to, when you have that, like, oh, I could get cake for dinner. Like,
I go to the grocery store all the time. Yeah.
That moment. I had that moment with comic books. I was like, oh, I could just buy these.
Just go ham.
But also, you can stop doing a cake for dinner thing.
No, I still do that. But I would just like go online, like Google like superheroes, whatever. Go to images and then be like, I don't know who that guy is, and I'd go and like try to find those comics. I was going like really scattershot random, and I kind of like recommending for people like. Richard laughs at me, but I always drop them into like big event comics.
Yeah, that's
like,
great. I love
where do I
that.
start? I'll give them something like really crazy where it's like all the weird continuity stuff, but all the characters are in there.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can like, I like that character's design. I want to know more about them, or they said something cool, or their power looks neat. And then you can go find more about them. Like the story, as you read it, might not make much sense because you're getting dropped into this big sort of crisis or whatever. But I like it because everyone is there, and you can actually pick and choose a little bit better, like who you think looks interesting. I do that all the time.
Today's episode is sponsored by Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating better every day easy. Wherever tomorrow takes you, be ready with pre-prepared, chef-crafted, and dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. You'll have over 35 different options a week to choose from, including keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, and more. And there's even more to enjoy with over 55 nutrition-packed add-ons that help make your weekly meal planning even more delicious. Fuel up fast with Factor's restaurant-quality 2-minute meals that are ready to heat and eat wherever you are. Discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. We've done the math. Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian-approved to be nutritious and delicious. Factor is the perfect solution if you're looking for fast, upscale options done easily. You can also get as much or as little as you need by choosing 6 to 18 meals per week. Plus, you can pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. No prep, no mess meals. Factor meals are 100% ready to heat and eat, so there's no prepping, cooking, or cleanup needed. Get started today and have a feel-good week of meals ready to go. Head to factormeals.com/DrDC50 and use code DrDC50 to get 50% off. That's code DrDC50 at factormeals.com/DrDC50 to get 50% off. And now, back to the show.
So we got some questions, and then maybe if some people here want to ask some questions, we'll do those as well. But why don't we start pulling from some of the questions that were sent to us for this episode?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we're going over to Facebook first.
Oh, go to the face in the book, go to the Facebook.
Maybe it was Discord. Yeah, I don't know. Did I pull from the wrong place?
I have no idea.
Okay. First question comes from Stump Chunkman.
Woohoo! Hey, there he is.
Who asks, how does Batman keep disappearing when people turn around for a second?
That does happen a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, Batman and Commissioner Gordon will be talking on a roof, and Gordon will drop his pen, and he goes to pick it up, and when he stands back up, Batman is gone. Yeah, I kind of like that as my favorite thing about Batman, and this comes back to that DC versus Marvel thing, is that in Marvel, or if you applied that idea of Marvel is a little bit more, real people get these powers or whatever.
Absolutely.
I feel like if you took that logically, you'd be like, Batman has installed secret ledges just off the side of all of the buildings in Gotham, so he can just hop over and hide. But I kind of like that he basically does just vanish. But I think the short answer is, I think he just jumps off and glides, right?
Just grappling hooks right at it.
Well, I would assume that he pre-grapples.
Yeah.
And so then the second he's just. But I like the idea that he's having a conversation, but it's like that thing when you're bad at social conversations and you're constantly thinking about, what am I going to say next? And then just listening to somebody so that you can then say your thing.
Yeah.
And I think the whole time he's just sitting there being like, is he going to turn around?
Yeah.
Is this the right time? I mean, you might have more to say. If there's
more,
nothing. There might be more for the case, but if he turns around now, it'd be really cool. But
I don't know if anyone else has seen it. There's the comedian Pete Holmes.
Oh, those are so good.
Does a series of sketches about he's sort of playing the Bale Batman, but it's all in all these scenarios. But one of them is him constantly trying to disappear, and Gordon keeps turning back too fast. So Gordon will turn to do something, and he turns back, and Batman's got to, and he's got to come back and do it again. I do kind of love that idea that in the comics we're following the cool action, but if you just looked over here, that would be sneaking over and off the building.
You just
so awkward if you just turn the corner and he's behind the water cooler and you're he's
pay no attention to the bat behind the water.
You just see his feet sticking out from the
But I
Batman, are you still there? No.
But you also think that...
Could you turn around, please?
This is embarrassing for me. I do wonder if he does that just to Commissioner Gordon, though.
Yeah. it's because I never got to play hide and seek with my parents.
No, they're still hiding.
That's what Alfred told me.
That would be really bad. Let's go to the next question.
Sure.
From Big Huge Large, who asks, what do you make of the idea that DC characters are less relatable than Marvel characters?
I mean, this is maybe a good question for you now, as someone that's sort of, you know, you're not like deep into reading comics from either of those. From someone who maybe just takes in the movies or sees the stuff on TV, what's your impression of how relatable DC kind of characters might be compared to Marvel? Is there a difference? Do you perceive that at all?
I think if you base it around the movies, and maybe I don't enjoy the DC movies as much as the Marvel ones,
Sure.
by any capacity. Although like Peacemaker was incredible.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so like they can have moments, but like there's a weird like edgelordy, like grimdark stuff, I feel like, with a lot of the DC movies that I don't think is representative of the comics from what I know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and that's totally true. It's so funny, you know, you hear people say it kind of like flippantly, like DC is dark. You go, like, it's actually really not.
Yeah.
Like the comics are so silly sometimes.
There's just so much Batman out there, I think, that it's easy to interpret. And the stuff that I think is lauded as like the best of DC, it's like Frank Miller and things, and it's like, so you start, the things that are held up as the best, or to like, I think, general readers, is probably some of the darkest stuff, the Killing Joke, right? It's like you're looking at things that are necessarily some really dark stuff, and I think it's easy to misinterpret that as what the voice of DC is.
Yeah.
But I think that it makes sense to me, but once you sort of lift under the surface a little bit, I find that DC goes sometimes weirder, which I love, and is more willing to take some really crazy chances.
Mm-hmm. Well, even just like the Harley Quinn like animated show is so good, and like just all the like D-list villains that pop up and stuff, and you're like, yeah,
Kite Man, hell yeah,
is amazing. I was gonna come in and just answer every question
Kite
Man today.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and that's, I think it's a pity that hasn't been explored more in like the movies and stuff. I feel like, you know.
So then when you watch something like that, and they've got all these kind of extra, you know, characters, Kite Man or whatever, what would it, like, I'm sometimes curious about this from people. What would it take to, like, see that thing, be interested in it, and then what's the transfer to, like, I should go, like, pick up a comic or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, for me, I like, the ones I've picked up are like, I talk to a friend and I'm like, where do I start? And they say, you know, pick up year one. And I go, great. And I read it and it's amazing. But like, I do find sometimes you go into a comic store and it is intimidating, and then like there's so much choice, and it's like you don't want to, like, I don't know, you don't know where to start, because you don't want to be here and like miss context or grab this, but it's the bad run, this is the good one. You know?
Right, yeah.
So it's like the being frozen in indecision, and then you just get something either familiar or take a recommendation. And I think, unfortunately, the recommendations are like those classics. Of course, you miss out on kind of like maybe the wackier stuff, or maybe the thing that you'd actually really like, even if it's still great.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The thing that I often do is try to collect the weird stuff, and then and that's the stuff that I sort of try to find the little pieces for. And I think that's part of the great thing about comic collecting too, which is that it's like, I don't want to buy the full collection, like I want to find them everywhere. And so doing the stuff that's harder to find and weirder is also a great way to slowly, I think, digest bits of the funner parts of DC. But then also you get this sort of journey of being able to discover other things while you're sort of trying to find those. I think that's been a really great way for me. And then the trades are obviously an awesome way to be able to just like dive into a single story and be able to like understand a character.
Yeah.
But I think that the relatability piece is, I think it's fair. I think the things that I always look at DC for are not necessarily the like human connection that I'm seeing. I think there are definitely cases of that for sure. I think that's part of the reason why I like Superman for All Seasons and stuff like that. And you know, just being like an incredible guy who has to like, you know, deal with that day to day is something that I really relate to. But I find that the thing that I always look for DC is like, it's more of like inspiration. It's more of like what could you imagine? I wish I could do that. It's less about the like I see myself in that character. It's more of like I wish that I could be that character.
Yeah, I think some of the stuff's hard to like visualize too. Like there have been some successful versions of this. So I'm about to say a thing that sounds sort of dumb, but I think some of like the powers and stuff in DC are actually kind of hard to translate out of comics.
Sure.
Like Green Lantern to me is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Green Lantern has a ring, and with his willpower, he can make anything he can imagine.
They did a great movie. What are you talking about?
But but you end up with like, well, what does that actually look like when it has to be real?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is it like a glowing, transparent green cube? Maybe. Like the idea in the comics is that it's just hard light. But what does that mean? Like, and I think every time you kind of bump up against, we have to make this real now. So a character like that, or like the Flash's super speed, like if you look at how fast the Flash is in the comics, that's not a movie.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
the robbery alarm goes off, and immediately everyone is tied up, sent to the cops. It's over. Like, he's so fast, so you have to kind of like slow him down. And do you slow everything down around him, or do you show him zipping around? How crazy is the lightning? Is it real lightning, or is it just visual light? Like, there's all these languages in comics that like make something look really dynamic and cool, and as soon as you try to put it into a movie, you start asking more questions than you have ever asked about it, where it's like, oh, is that, I thought maybe the lighting was just cool colors to emphasize that he was running. Is it real lightning? And then you start having to deal with that, and I think that puts up barriers, like, to relating to the thing, because you're so caught up in, like, the mechanics of how the superhero works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it's a fair thing to say about the relatability piece, but I don't think that's the conversation we're having. And I think that's more of the piece, which is the great thing about these two comic book distributors is the fact that they offer different things. And so I think that it's worth it. And if what you're looking for is representation, or I think there are versions of that within DC, but maybe not necessarily from like the human relatability standpoint. But we're getting better at it with the new sort of storytelling, and I feel like we are going more to like a humanistic approach with a lot of like more modern storytelling.
I mean, I'd probably argue the opposite, but again, if you're a casual fan, I don't know that you would know that about DC.
Sure.
You know, like, I think everyone knows what the X-Men's about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just, like, out there. But I don't know that people necessarily know that they could find a similar sort of human story in Aquaman or Metamorpho or Doom Patrol or things like that. You know, like, I don't know that that's as well known.
Absolutely. But more of just, I think that those stories are starting to come out more from DC.
I think they've been there the whole time, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Like, people just don't know.
Well, it's weird to me because Superman, I feel like power-wise, isn't relatable, but as a human, is fully. And like, there's Smallville, and there's so many things about the human aspects of Superman that, like, to me, as again being like more of a casual fan, I wouldn't look at Marvel and DC and put them that way aside from the movies.
Right. Yeah.
I think the movies are less relatable, but as from what I know about them, just as like comic entities, I don't think there's that difference.
I don't think so now. There may have been earlier in their histories, but so many of the creators work at one and then work at another, and so, I think those lines blur a lot more now.
Those are always my favorite times when we like are at the panels for comic creators here, and you're like, so, like, what's the difference? And you watch them struggle for like 5 minutes to not talk shit about somebody. It's my favorite thing.
It is pretty good, yeah.
All right, let's go to the next question from Mullet, who asks, when did the concept of the Trinity come about, and who was the main force behind it?
So the Trinity in DC.
Do you know who the Trinity is? If you really,
yeah, let's do it.
Who, if you were going to say like the main three?
Batman, Superman, and not Aquaman. Sorry.
I know.
Not a man.
I don't know who's the third. This is probably really Flash.
Wonder Woman.
I was going to say Wonder Woman.
Flash is a good guess though too. Yeah, I mean, DC calls them the Trinity. They put them up on this kind of pedestal as if they were always like the three kind of big pillars, and in a way they were. Like publishing, publishing wise, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Flash were basically the only ones that had their own comics consistently. But Wonder Woman comics for a long time weren't treated very well. Like there's a bunch of silly stories, and they're sort of
women in the '60s weren't treated very well.
Wait, why?
And it's not until you get into like the '80s and like the George Perez stuff where it's like, no, Wonder Woman's like this Greek demigod, and she's got all this cool history and these amazing powers, and she's a great superhero.
I'm pretty sure she wears go-go boots, actually, and...
Well, there's that, like, 70s, like, spy one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not until later that they kind of promote her to being, like, up with Batman and Superman.
She still makes only 80% of what they do, but...
That's messed up. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea, but I do think it, like, hamstrings them a little bit, because, you know, like not just the Flash. Like, Flash is super powerful. Should Flash be one of, like, the big three? Does it have to be Batman and Superman? Does it, like... I think you get stuck in these things a little bit, where it's like, here's our three.
When it
technically, like, Marvel's got a little bit of that, but even if you go, like, the three of the Avengers, I guess, are, like, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor.
Yeah.
But there have been so many Avengers lineups that, like, to me, from more on the outside of Marvel, I don't look at that and go, like, they're the three, don't touch those, or blah, blah, blah. But in DC, it's like, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, don't mess with them.
Which is very funny, too, because Batman, like, outside of being very popular and good, does not fit with those two. Like,
Sure.
He shouldn't be on the Justice League. He should, like, he's nowhere near what the rest of them are. They are able to write him into a situation where he's able to be, like, on the same level. But theoretically, like, Batman shouldn't be there.
But that's the Bat God thing, right?
Yeah.
Where he's just better than us,
Yes.
right? Like, he needs a jet that flies faster than jets fly, because otherwise Superman and Wonder Woman show up somewhere, and then he drives up later. He's like, I couldn't find parking. I'm sorry, I'm late.
I thought I got the app, but then I didn't have the app. It was a new kind of app. It was called Hotspot, I think.
I was using Apple Maps, and it took me the wrong direction.
Yeah, I tried to pay, but it wasn't able to work with my Apple Pay, so then I had to fill my wallet first before I could pay from that.
I just bought the company instead.
Yeah. Looks like you have this under control, though. So.
But yeah, who created this concept of the Trinity?
I don't know if you can pin it down to one person, but there is a Trinity comic book. If people are interested in reading a comic that just specifically stars that team, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
Cool art style too.
There's a Trinity comic book that's Kurt Busiek, and then they've done it again since they did another Trinity comic, but that's a cool one, and it's neat to see where you put these three together, because like you said, they don't necessarily fit. Like, one's an alien with all the powers, one's a dude with great skill but no powers, and one is like from myth. She's like a god, you know, like, and the three of them come together, so you have some sci-fi adventures, and you have some detective adventures, and you have some magic adventures, and it's actually kind of cool that way. That book goes to some pretty crazy places eventually, but it's neat to see them work as a unit, even outside of, like, the Justice League or something like that.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to the next question from Shambling Mound of Flowers, who asks, in your opinion, / headcanon, how is Batman as a dad to the Robins? Like, on a scale of Wayne Family Adventures to Robin can eat the rats in the Batcave, where do you see Bat Dad failing?
So the Wayne Family Adventures is a very, very fun webcomic that is more just about them as a family.
Yeah.
Like Bruce and all of the different Robins, which is very cute. The rats thing is from All-Star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder, which is a real specific dark take on the early days of Batman.
Dark take from him?
From Frank Miller.
Frank Miller? No.
Strange departure for him.
It's a sort of, like, all kind of like sort of tortures Robin to train him. It's kind of messed up.
Is that where the yellow thing comes from? Is that
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
it's
also
right.
right.
Yellow.
Yeah.
And does he actually eat the rats in the back end?
I think he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's messed up.
That's actually the worst thing in that book.
Well, this is the joke in general, though, is that, like, why does Batman keep employing children to fight crime?
I mean, I don't know if he's employing them, but
Yeah. Do they get paid?
Well, like, room and board?
Do they have medical?
Yeah. How do you feel about the idea of Robin? Because sidekicks in general is kind of barely a thing in comics anymore. What do you think of Robin as like an idea?
I don't know. It's because it's always been Robin, you know what I mean? So it's hard to be like, no, should it be Robin? I really enjoyed Merry Little Batman.
Yeah, that's a great movie. That's a cute one.
I thought it was awesome.
Batman's great, yeah.
And I think like having Robin like is such a good foil to Batman because he is so serious and he is so, it ties in again, relatability, right? He lost his parents, now he's this like surrogate father, and it is wild to just be like, yeah, another kid, great. Like that's a strange move.
I can't remember if it's Frank Miller or not, but there's a comic somewhere too where they imply that Robin's costume is bright and colorful so that bad guys target him and Batman can sneak around and do his Batman work, which is its own kind of version of that stuff too.
That's not being a good parent either.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go in and you have a look at it, like objectively, Bruce is sort of 50-50 on his success rate with Robin. Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing, he's a great hero. That's like the ultimate success of Batman, is that someone else managed to grow up less traumatically than he did.
Yes.
But then, like, Jason Todd dies because a bunch of people called the phone line in the 80s and demanded it. And then, Tim Drake, good Robin. Damian, super messed up, dark little kid.
But was messed up before getting
But was messed up before Bruce.
Yeah.
Bruce probably makes it better, But, I don't know, there is a weird just pattern that it's always kids. It's not like, well, this one was a kid and I helped them, and then I found someone else that needed help and I helped that. Like, it's just always children.
It would be different if one just ended up being a kid as opposed to always nothing but kids.
Yeah. I think you're right that it's mostly just a pattern at this point. Batman and Robin, and that's just how you do it. Because I don't know that that would be the choice to make now.
Are there good examples of like him being a father?
Every once in a while, someone puts the effort into a comic to show that. There's a short story. It's about Jason, so the Robin that died, who eventually comes back as Red Hood, the sort of anti-hero. But there's a story from when he's Robin where he's sick. Like, he's got a cold.
Sure.
And he wants to go out on patrol, and Bruce is already gone, and Alfred's like, he left without you. And Jason is like, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as the last Robin. He's really down on himself. And Bruce, like, just comes home early from patrol. He's like, some crime will happen. And he just, like, sits with him, like, in their costumes, just watching a movie. And, like, you get something like that, where, like, one of them's having a hard time to go, like, play basketball or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
But, like, Bruce, so he has that in him. He has the capacity for, like, being a good dad and stuff, but he's also, like, the mission.
Yes.
So he can only be so good of a dad. I mean, really, I think it's more that the Robins, like, help each other.
Yeah.
The past Robin helps the new Robin. Like, they form a family, and then they go see Bruce, and he goes, yeah, I guess that's all right. It's pretty nice, actually, to be a family,
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, well, those were our questions that we were sent in. Is there any questions from anybody here that might want to ask one? Yeah, sure.
I'm the real Mr. Imagination, so I'll stand up. If you know, you know. Oh, is there a mic?
There's not a mic.
All right. So the Joker has cheated death so many times. In your mind, is he immortal or does he just refuse to die?
So the Joker has, yes, theoretically died a lot, but is he immortal?
Technically speaking, Joker is a person. But
We don't like to acknowledge that canon,
but in DC, they do this thing that I really like, and it feels like you'd like it as a guy that likes sort of fantasy and sci-fi and that, which is that like fiction is real in another parallel Earth. So the comic books on one Earth are actually showing you what's happening on a different one. And so in that sense, because there's Jokers everywhere, because there's Batman everywhere, like they become like cosmic. Like they always have to exist in some version everywhere. And I kind of like that. I think I like technically if Joker is a person, but he has to be so mysterious and so crazy and such like a force of nature that you're like, is he a ghost? Is he
Sure,
real?
yeah.
You know?
I like that too. I think that's a good version of him.
What do you think about the Joker? Because for me, as a comic fan, I feel like he's overexposed.
Yeah, he's definitely like, if there were a trinity of villains, he would be there because he's, I would say, the most popular villain, especially lately, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially since like Heath Ledger and everything.
Yeah.
I think he's very cool. There's kind of like, he doesn't really have powers, right? Like, so there's that, like, which I guess is a good matchup for Batman because he also doesn't have
Exactly.
powers.
Yeah.
But I think he's really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah, absolutely.
So, I know the Batman is like the main, gatekeeper of DC universe.
Yes.
But another thing that made me interested in DC was Watchmen by Alan Moore.
Watchmen, yeah.
And I was just wondering why in the movie Watchmen, Ozymandias was watching several TV screens in his room.
Ooh.
Remember the scene? So what is the significance of this scene? Where Ozymandias is sitting in his room and watching Richard Nixon and all the other people there with all those TV screens.
That's a great question. Yeah, why was Ozymandias watching all of those TV screens? Richard Nixon, what was
in Watchmen? Well, the idea with that character in Watchmen is he's supposed to be the smartest man in the world, like impossibly smart. So he can think at a faster rate and about more things. And so I think they use that TV screen to sort of these are all the different things he's processing at any one time, right? I think that's the idea, because he's supposed to be so impossibly smart that he, spoiler alert, pulls off this crazy scheme of his, ultimately.
Yeah, great. Oh, love Watchmen. Have you seen Watchmen?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Any other questions before we go? Yeah, for the back.
What are your guys' thoughts on the new James Gunn movie series?
Yeah, the James Gunn taking over DC. I mean, DC's been looking for a 5e for years. And I think that we've seen everything from them trying to compete with Marvel in this big connected universe, and we've seen them try to do own little bits of things, and there's been successes and failures. But seeing James Gunn come in and try to right that ship is a really interesting thing. I'd be curious.
I mean, for me, I just want movies to enjoy.
Yes.
I think at the time I wanted DC to crush a connected cinematic universe the way Marvel did. But I've seen it with Marvel, and they did a great job, and I loved all the way up to Endgame. I'm in, they didn't have to sell me. And now I kind of just, whether they're connected or not, I just want movies I can enjoy. Yeah. And I liked his Suicide Squad, and I liked Peacemaker. Yeah. And I have no reason to think that his Superman won't be good. So I'm excited to have someone that is joyful about the thing being in charge. That's kind of my ultimate take on it.
For sure.
How about you?
Yeah, I think Peacemaker I think was so good. I think the only kind of worry is that while he is very good, a lot of his stuff is tonally quite similar.
Yeah.
So I don't think you could do a Superman in the vein of Peacemaker, right?
Yeah, sure.
It would be insane.
Yeah.
So if he can nail that tonal shift, which again, there does seem to be this genuine care and love.
Yeah.
So I think he will, but that would be my only concern.
Yeah.
I think that's totally valid. And I think as I've been doing, sort of watching this journey happen, James Gunn come in, and especially with the Superman movie, and a lot of the reference imagery that he's been using has been really great, and I think indicative of what he's going for. I think it's totally fair because, again, I think he does have an approach that we've seen for the most part. And I think it's not all just weird and things like that. Like Guardians of the Galaxies, like 2 and 3, I think, did expand slightly outside of that more weird tone that he's known for. But then Peacemaker obviously is such a specific approach. But I think the thing I'm most excited about is less about his actual directing and creating, but more about his understanding of the lesser known characters and his appreciation that, I mean, look at Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like, you can take a group of characters that people don't necessarily know and make a great movie.
In this Superman movie, we're getting Metamorpho. Is there a Metamorpho fan out there anywhere? Yeah. It's the Element Man.
Yeah.
Metamorpho's going to be in there. The Engineer from The Authority is there's some cool stuff coming. I'm excited that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Very, very excited.
He seems to relish the weirder, lesser known characters, which again is great.
Yeah.
Because that's what opens up the full universe, and it's not just the Trinity, right?
Totally. Exactly.
Amazing.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. This time of the year can be tough. It's cold and dark outside, and you feel like you're all peopled out. How do you set boundaries and give yourself the alone time you need? Most people don't have an endless social battery. Therapy can help you listen to your body and give yourself the time to recharge. In the past few years, I have made choices that have improved every part of my life, and I honestly wouldn't have been able to do any of it without therapy. Through therapy, I have gained confidence and learned to draw important boundaries. If you want to make things better or just a bit easier, or you want somebody to talk to, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, so it's easier to fit into any schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can even switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/DrDC today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/DRDC.
Well, that is the end of this episode. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, Niall, for coming on the podcast. Tell people where they can find you online.
Sure, yeah. So I have 2 podcasts. One is Fuck Buddies. It's a sex and dating advice podcast. We're very sex positive. You can find us anywhere. You might have to do F***CK because we were dumb and named our show with a bad word. I also have another one called No Quest for the Wicked, which is a Starfinder podcast. So basically like sci-fi D&D, very much in the vein of Guardians of the Galaxy meets Firefly. And you can find us pretty much everywhere, so please do.
Yeah, and then we are Dr. DC all over the internet. Make sure that you subscribe to us, and make sure to come out to our other podcast today at 1 o'clock, Ghostfacers, or Supernatural Rewatch.
Yeah, and we'll be at the Sonar booth in between.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, yeah, no worries.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.